Since the dawn of time, all civilizations have believed in ghosts and the supernatural in some form or other. These are ancient mysteries, and to dismiss them is to deny ourselves that arcane knowledge of the past that has ultimately fashioned our lives. For wherever we may stand, on no matter which particular landscape of this planet, beneath our feet are the many layers of these previous civilizations, which have left their irrevocable mark, not only on the physical landscape, but on our subconscious too. My obsession is a search for the hidden realities that lie concealed within the ethereal shadows of ruined castles and decaying gargoyles. In the remote, quieter corners of our landscape, there is a strange feeling that we are not alone. And as we pass by some ruined mansion or moonlit abbey at nightfall, we know that within the crumbling walls there still lurk dark spirits from the distant past, watching, waiting. I suppose it was natural that I should develop an interest in ghosts and all things supernatural from an early age, as I spent my childhood in two archaic haunted houses in a remote part of the English countryside, where I would play for days on my own in the parklands, with only my imagination as a friend. Both my father and elder brother were avid readers of ghost stories, and I inherited the family's library on the genre. My favorites were Arthur Machen and M.R. James, mainly for their emphasis on mysteries as old as time itself, but also for the subtlety of their narrative. In later years, I discovered the works of Edgar Allan Poe, whose eerie tales of decaying Gothic mansions and dark crypts seemed to mirror my own obsession with the ghosts that haunted them. On my 21st birthday, my father, who was himself a keen photographer, gave me an old Leica camera, and I instantly became hooked on photography. What intrigued me most was the magic of time and light and the enigma of reality that these elements conjured up. Over the years, I've tried to portray this theme in my photographs, to inspire the viewer not to take everything around them at face value, to show that what we are conditioned to believe is reality may not be quite all that it seems, if only we take the time to inquire. The mystical quality of the photographs reflects an ancient order and attempts to reveal what is eternal. One of the oldest civilizations in Europe, Ireland's cultural heritage lies deep within its Celtic traditions of myth and magic. As a race, they embraced the awesome power of nature and the suspension of reality, made poets their kings, and believed in another world that lay close to the borders of our manifest real world. For them, the period between day and night, the twilight hour, was a dangerous time when one's earthly spirit or soul might cross over into this supernatural world. The ancient Celts recognized that this world was not the only level of existence, and that another realm of the ever-living, of demons and ghosts, was always close to the surface of reality, and this other world was therefore very real to them. They regarded the many ancient earthworks and standing stones of their ancestors to be the dwelling place of these beings of the other world, which the Irish called the She. The She embodies the halfway state between one world and the next, and was said to be of two kinds, the tall shining ones and the opalescents lit from within. One such place was a hilltop passage grave known as Slieve na Calia, or the Hill of the Witch, which is still said to be haunted by mysterious figures and eerie screams in the dead of night. The Celts believed magical agencies pervaded every aspect of their lives and surroundings, and it was their holy men and soothsayers, the Druids, who through a process of initiation inside these dark interiors gained access to this ancestral spirit world, reawakening latent powers that they then channeled for good or evil. The Druids were known to have practiced animal and human sacrifices at ritual gatherings on hilltops and in oak forests, by stabbing, strangulation, or other means. They closely observed the death struggle of their victim to divine the future. The Celtic mysteries, the duality of the visible world of nature and the invisible realm of ghosts, live on in this stone figure, which sits back to back with its double in a remote Irish graveyard. To the Celts, man was not separate from nature, but a part of it. Every river, lake, and well, every plain, hill, and mountain had its own name. It was as if the ground had some sacred power, and this harmony with nature brought with it a powerful supernatural knowledge. They could tell the future by observing the flight of birds and the behavior of animals, the patterns of clouds and the flow of rivers. These ancient beliefs live on in the minds of the Irish people, a legacy of dark pagan terrors that still haunt the present, an elementary evil that outlasts time. Known universally as the most haunted house in all Ireland, Leap Castle was once the principal seat of the powerful and warlike O'Carrolls, princes of Ely. It stands on a vast, ancient rock, guarding a strategic pass through the wild Slieve Bloom Mountains, and on my first visit, I can distinctly remember my initial feelings of fear and fascination. Nowhere before had ever held so many suggestions of the supernatural. The O'Carrolls were the last clan to surrender to the British in the 17th century, and their fearsome reputation has left behind a legacy of intrigue and murder. Local people are still in awe of the castle and are fearful of the many ghosts that haunt it. Above the main hall of the great 14th century tower is what is known as the Bloody Chapel, where one-eyed Tig O'Carroll slew his brother at the altar, and, late at night, passers-by on the main road have seen a window of the room suddenly illuminated by a strange light. In one corner of this chamber was a spiked oubliette, a secret dungeon into which unsuspecting prisoners were thrown down through a trapdoor and conveniently forgotten. 3 cartloads of bones were extracted from here after the house was destroyed by fire in 1922. Below the keep, a network of deep dungeons were hewn into the rock, containing bricked-up passages and secret chambers. Several human skeletons were found here too. The last owners of the castle, before it was burnt by the IRA, were the Anglo-Irish Derby family, who obtained the estate when Jonathan Derby married the daughter of an O'Carroll chieftain in the 17th century. A staunch royalist, he was known as the Wild Captain, and is said to have hidden a fabulous hoard of treasure in the castle with the help of 2 servants, who he then murdered, before he himself was falsely imprisoned for treason. When he was released many years later, his mind was so deranged that he couldn't remember where he'd hidden the chest, and his insane ghost is still said to be searching for it. During the period of the Derby's residence, overnight guests frequently experienced the terrifying spectre of a tall female figure, dressed in what seemed to be a red gown, with her right hand raised menacingly above her head, seemingly illumined from within. The unfortunate visitor always awoke suddenly in the middle of the night prior to this nightmarish vision, with an extraordinary and violent cold feeling in the region of their heart. The strangest and most demonic spectre is a foul-smelling elemental, half human, half beast, that haunts the tower stair, and is believed to be the embodiment of all the horrific and evil deeds that have taken place here. The present owner is the accomplished musician Sean Ryan, who is seeking to rid the castle of these nightmarish spectres.
We first heard about from a friend of ours, Lady Ross in Castle, and she asked me at a party one night would I be interested in buying a castle in the Slieve Bloom Mountains with a galvanised roof on it. And of course, the immediate response was no, thank you. And but she persisted and eventually persuaded me to come and look at it. So we arrived of a very, very wet morning to see it. And we saw it at its worst, but we fell in love with it and decided possibly we could, take it on and do something with it. 2 of the spirits we experience at the moment are little girls, 2 little girls who lived here in the early 1600s. Emily would be about 11 or 12, I'd say, and Charlotte younger, about 6 or 7. And they play around the hall. Charlotte has a very badly deformed right leg. It's almost completely turned backwards. And she hobbles around after Emily calling her name. Now, we know Emily fell off the top of the castle, off the southeast corner of the castle. And quite a lot of people who come in actually see her fall and see the rope ladder effect where she had to climb up onto the gable battlement. They probably went up playing there and shouldn't have, and she fell. Now, occasionally with them then there's a governess or a nanny. The funny thing about her is she makes herself known more to visitors than to us. And I think myself she's the one sad spirit in the house I would like to pass on. She's trying to get a message over. Two elder ladies were at the door, and they were from the Western Cherokee Nation in America. And they were over here tracing routes because seemingly at the end of the 1700s, early 1800s, a lot of Irish men married into the Cherokee Nation. So they were over, and so in their compound names you get a lot of Irish surnames, and they were looking to trace relations and all that. But the minute they came inside the door, they actually, both of them went on their knees because they saw the two little girls that we see regularly here, Charlotte and Emily. They saw them playing around. We went up to the chapel then. They found it very hard up there. They found the energy just too much, and the heart was thumping up there. And the nearer they went to the oubliette, the worse it got for them. They told us that the spirits were huddling in corners up there because they were afraid of the work we were doing. And they seemed to think that they thought that it was going back to a bad regime where they probably lost their lives suddenly here. And they were quite afraid of it all. So we reassured them that that's not the way, through the American ladies, that that's not the way things were going to be in the future. In the north wing, there's a house called the Priest House. And in very early times, it's a Tudor house, but in early times, it housed a priest in the castle complex. But later, when the Anglo-Irish lived here and the Derbys lived here, it became the nursery for the children. The children were actually brought up in that. But we hear my name called a lot from that part of the house. Now, it's a total ruin at the minute. And the other thing we hear is a chant like a plain chant coming from there. Now, we tend to hear that mostly in the summertime, but I think that's because we use the green in the summer a lot. We sit out there, whereas in the winter you wouldn't be out there, so you wouldn't get the opportunity to hear it.
I believe that timeless spirits and primordial powers still haunt many of Ireland's great houses and castles. For me, these buildings are symbols of a vast stillness, a silence more powerful and lasting than man, a universal subconscious, a mystical and spiritual solitude. Their ivy-clad windows, soaring towers and crumbling walls, creating a timeless melancholy of death enveloped by the chill of the supernatural. It is an interesting fact that Irish writers over the centuries, driven by the collective unconscious of their mysterious Celtic past, have had such a profound influence in the genre of fantasy and horror fiction. Bram Stoker, Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, Fitzjames O'Brien, M.P. Shiel, and Charles Maturin, to name but a few. Edgar Allan Poe's father was of Irish descent. This magnificent Gothic extravaganza, hidden deep within an ancient oak forest, was designed by Francis Johnston in the 19th century for the fabulously wealthy dilettante Richard Charles Bury, later Viscount Charleville. Both men shared an interest in mystical theories and geometry, citing the castle where several ley lines, paths which connect prehistoric sites, crossed. These time-worn tracks were believed by our distant ancestors to have been conductors of a positive primal energy or earth force, and at the points where they crossed, unusual levels of paranormal activity have always been reported. I have found this to be the case at a large number of buildings that I've photographed, and it came as no surprise to learn that this castle is the subject of several ghost stories and other supernatural phenomena. In one of the towers, there is a bedroom where the vaulted ceiling meets in an 8-pointed star, a geometric device which concentrates energy, and I was told that this room had been the subject of violent poltergeist activity over the years. Amongst the many apparitions that have been seen in the dark corridors and eerie cellars of the castle is the ghost of a little girl who died while sliding down the banister of this staircase. The present owner's children, aged 4 and 6, have played with her and say that she told them that her name was Harriet and that she'd lived in the castle long ago. The children's mother told me that she was recently woken in the middle of the night by the sound of a child singing, followed by a piercing scream, and then silence. Another explanation for the existence of supernatural phenomena is what has become known as the tape recording theory. This concept proposes that certain inanimate objects, such as stone and wood, because of their chemical makeup and magnetic energy fields that surround them, are capable of storing extreme human emotions, much the same as modern recording techniques. And that when the conditions are right, particularly when the surroundings are damp, as in old buildings like this, and in the presence of a psychic or sensitive person, they can be replayed or reactivated. After dinner, I usually spend the time reading or catching up on my notes. Ghosts never seem far from my thoughts. The author Colin Wilson described the existence of a parallel supernatural world to me with the following analogy. A man is driving at night through the countryside at speed. The car headlights are full on and the radio is playing. Suddenly he slows down to a crawl, switches off the radio, dims the lights and winds down the windows. He is now receptive to a completely different experience of the world, one that is all too often obliterated by the demands and pace of modern living. It is in this elevated state, he suggested, that we can be said to be truly alive. The lonely ruin of Rathkill House lies on the wild coastline of the west of Ireland, an area rich in prehistoric standing stones and megalithic tombs. Its former owners, the Anglo-Irish Percival family, have long since left the area, but the terrifying hauntings that led to the destruction of their home live on in the memory of the local people. In the late 19th century, Giles Percival, an eminent archaeologist, travelled extensively in the Far East, bringing back a large collection of treasure, including Syrian swords and daggers and several mummies that he'd plundered from an Egyptian tomb. It would appear that almost as soon as these ancient artifacts were installed in the house, extremely unpleasant and malicious poltergeist activities began. A strange, evil figure would be seen on the stairway at night, and terrible loud crashes were heard throughout the house, with crockery and ornaments found smashed the next morning. On one occasion, the whole house shook. Several of the servants left, and a gardener was terrified by the apparition of a tall, dark shadow disappearing through the trees into the sea, followed by maniacal laughter. The manifestations became so bad that the owners had a party of Jesuit priests exorcise the mansion. But after 3 weeks they were forced to leave, admitting that they were powerless in the face of such evil. The building was abandoned and now stands an empty shell. I found one room in the ruin particularly oppressive. The wall above the fireplace had strange patterns on the plasterwork. It was as if something terrible had once passed through this area. The ancient Egyptians, like the Celts, attributed supreme powers to their priests and holy men. The mysteries of life and death were laid before them, and they could control the secrets of fate and destiny that were hidden from ordinary mortals. Each person, it was believed, had a shadow, or double, known as a ka, which lived on inside the tomb when their physical body died. Here it was kept alive with fresh offerings of food, drink, and incense, as well as fantastic treasures. But if these gifts were taken away, the spirit would wander abroad to reclaim them, and to wreak havoc and death on those who defiled the tomb. I too believe that another dimension, a spirit world, runs parallel to our own so-called real world, and that sometimes, when the conditions are right, we can see into and become part of this supernatural domain. Surrounded by the ancient woods of Trua that date back to Celtic times, Castle Leslie's parklands and lakes retain all the mystery and peaceful grandeur of a bygone era. Home to the Leslie family for over 300 years, the present house replaced a tower house built by Bishop John Leslie in 1664. The castle has many ghosts, and Sir Shane Leslie, the third baronet, was an author and poet who wrote extensively on the supernatural. The austere exterior of the house is contrasted by the magnificent flights of architectural fantasy in the interior. Here the halls, galleries and walls are adorned with ancient weapons, stags' heads and portraits of generations of Leslies, alongside bizarre statues and macabre heirlooms, such as the blood-soaked cloth that received the head of James, Earl of Derwentwater, who was executed in 1715 during the Jacobite Rebellion. I was told by a member of the family that the now derelict billiard room was an area of the house that they had always been afraid of when children, as they had heard footsteps and groans here at night. Interestingly, I saw strange dancing lights in the camera lens when photographing here, which I couldn't explain. I respect the magic of photography and never try to control it. We need to be free to express ourselves in life. Few original works of art are created without stretching or bending the rules. It is known that we have two sensory systems, one conscious and the other unconscious, and that the unconscious processes information faster and more accurately. This system is known as our sixth sense and is tuned into the spiritual world. We have quite deliberately suppressed these powers as they are of little use in our highly mechanized modern-day world, but we all possess remnants of this inherent intellect and can reactivate it if we desire. The long arched gallery that runs parallel to the cloisters is filled with frescoes of family members and mysterious classical figures that were painted by the first baronet, Sir John Leslie, a talented artist of the pre-Raphaelite school who built the present castle. John Norman Leslie, or Jack as he is affectionately known, the fourth baronet, returned to his childhood home in 1994 after spending 40 years in Rome. An intelligent, sensitive man, he told me that he believed in the supernatural, but had always felt at peace with the spirits that haunt the castle, although he had experienced evil in other houses that he had visited. Once, when a young boy, he'd been staying with his cousins at Breed Place, a badly haunted house in England. And one night, when he was playing on the stairs that led to the attic, he was passed by a tall, pallid figure that he nervously said goodnight to, only to later discover that the attic was an empty room that had apparently been locked for many years.
There is no need to pursue ghosts or to discern unwilling spirits. If they are part of the invisible texture around us, they can find their way to us. If they come to a careful researcher armed with some pre-knowledge, they must take the consequences. The object of this book is to collect instances of ghosts, apparitions, and messages from the other or the Twilight world. This is the Red Room, and it was always my mother and father's. They slept in a big bed there from Perugia, the big Italian bed. Well, one night in 1914, they were sleeping there, and my mother woke up, and she saw Norman, my father's brother, going through the room in a sort of pale blue light. So she nudged my father and said, "Wake up, Sean, Norman's here." And he woke up, and then Norman looked at her, smiled, and then vanished away that side. Well, he was killed 2 days later at Armentières in Belgium, October 1914. But when she saw him here, he was still alive, and he looked at her and smiled. I must say, I feel very uncomfortable in certain houses, in certain rooms, like Leven's Hall in Westmoreland or Breed Place in Sussex. I know there's someone in the room. And even sitting down for dinner, say 6 sitting down for dinner, a butler serving, 7 in the room. But who's the 8th person? There's someone else in this room. How do you know it, you might say? I don't know. I just know there's somebody there. Leven's Hall, our cousin's house, the Baggots, near Kendal in Westmoreland, they lent it to our other cousins, the Crauchetes, for a summer. And the Crauchetes brought up a maid from London. And everyone was told, you mustn't talk about the ghost in front of her. She knows nothing about it at all. Well, She used to draw the curtains in the little library at night. And she said, you know, I can't stand that room at night. I go in and draw the curtains. There's something in it. It's horrid. I feel frightened. Oh, they say absolute nonsense. Nothing at all. 2 days later, they found her stone dead on the floor of the room with a terrible expression of horror on her face. Once I did see a ghost in a rather unghostly place. The English Preparatory School at Lyon-sur-Montreux, when I was aged about 10. Well, I had a little room at the top with a balcony, and it faced onto a modern cemetery, I suppose 100 feet away, where people were buried continually. Well, a very hot June night, I was sitting up in my bed. It was quite light, I suppose about 10:30 in mid-June, and I saw a black figure walking around and around in circles. I thought it was a nun in black who had come to put flowers on a grave or something like that. And I just thought it very odd. It seemed to be just walking around in little circles. Well, then I was fascinated by this. Then I saw something just beside it, a white rabbit. It looked like a big white Angora rabbit nibbling grass or something. And this white rabbit got bigger and bigger and bigger, and a white figure came out of the ground, pushing the soil away like that. And it joined the black figure walking around, and they walked around in little figures of 8, gliding, you might say, shuffling or gliding, not paying the slightest attention to each other, although they were within 10 feet of each other. And I thought, this is extraordinary, there's a ghost. Well, I had a friend called Louis, who slept in the dormitory downstairs. So I went downstairs, I went to Louis's bed, I woke him up, I said, wake up, Louis, come up to my balcony and watch the ghosts of the cemetery. Well, he was too tired, he just sort of groaned, I'm too tired, turned over, wouldn't come up. Well, then I went back, expecting to see them again. They weren't there. And every evening I used to look out at that time, expecting to see them again. I never saw them again. I thought, this is extraordinary, there's a ghost.
I must have photographed over 1,000 reputedly haunted sites over the years, and at only a very few have I felt threatened in the presence of evil. Certainly at the Rollright Stones in England, a circle of prehistoric megaliths known to have been used in witchcraft ceremonies throughout the ages, and where I was hurled to the ground by an unknown force, my camera strap ripped from my neck. Inside, the house is damp, full of broken glass and crumbling plasterwork. Surprisingly, some of the tall mirrors are still intact, but it is dangerous to walk on some of the upstairs floors. I began to feel very much alone. Then as I reached the bottom of the great staircase, I heard a strange noise, a moan, like a cry for help. I stood transfixed for a few seconds, and then it came again, louder. Definitely a female voice. Shaken by this experience, I later spoke with an old man, a farmer who lived near the estate. I asked him if there were any ghost stories attached to the house. He thought for a while, then smiled, replying, "I've never heard of any." But then he hesitated and added, "A long time ago, when I was a young man, I had a friend who worked for the then Lord Ashtown, and he told me that some human limbs, an arm and a leg, were found in bogland in the park. They were a young girl's, and there was a suggestion of murder, but it was never proved. Some say hushed up. There was a room at the top of the house that was always kept locked, but there isn't a living soul up there now." Then as he turned to go, he added, "The last owner shot himself." Who or what made that sad cry, I will almost certainly never know. The only thing that I'm certain of is it was not of this world, and will haunt me for the rest of my life. I used to stay in an old house in Limerick, where a prominent 19th century lawyer had strangled his wife in a crime of passion. Her ghost still haunts the building and surrounding streets, but I never saw her there. However, she sometimes appears to me in a nightmare. Our world today is driven by the relentless and all-consuming marriage of science and commerce. We appear to be dismissing or forgetting much that our distant ancestors knew, our links with nature and the ancient magic from man's farthest and darkest past, things that are rooted indelibly within the mind of man. Science can explain anything away if one allows it to, just as all one's original thoughts and beliefs as a child can be eroded by the cynicism of one's elders. Sometimes I discover places by chance. I came across this mausoleum in the woods at Monivet. Robert Percy French died in Naples in 1896, and the resplendent mausoleum was built by his only child, Kathleen, to commemorate the father she adored. It took 4 years to build while his body lay embalmed in Milan, until the vault was ready to receive him. His cold marble effigy lies alone in the center of the building. For me, no one makes death and decay seem more beautiful than Poe. His stories and poems have a timeless quality, and they gain in perpetuity because they are so divorced from reality. In the same sort of way, I feel that as I photograph these buildings, I am abandoning myself to the mystery of death. Like Poe, I suspect that I shall only find peace in the grave, surrounded by these ghosts of the past and their eerie silence.
Out, out are the lights, out all. And over each quivering form, the curtain, a funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm. And the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy. Man and its hero, the conqueror worm.